Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of BrickSide Chat, where we take your questions and turn them into conversations. My name is Evan.
And I'm Paul.
And today we're going to be talking about caring for the customer and give you our take on providing quality customer service.
Yeah. And this topic kind of came about by, I was looking through the Discord, as sometimes I do, and I had noticed there's a lot of the talk in there is sharing, I guess, these horror stories about difficult customers. And, that obviously Evan and I have, done that a little bit internally too, if we encounter something. But so there's nothing wrong with that. But we had kind of noticed there seems to be a lot of very different opinions about the customer and about customer service. And we decided that we kind of wanted to do a topic video about how to maybe alleviate some of these problems that a lot of people are expounding upon. And, part of it is just that it's fun to, fun to complain. But
Absolutely.
A lot of it is also just we're seeing there might be some confusion about how to go about truly trying to prevent these issues from occurring and how to go about thinking about them in such a way that they don't subtract from your experience of running a business. If that kind of makes a little bit of sense there, right? It's about trying to get the most out of something that's going to happen in terms of, a customer potentially having an issue of how can you turn that around and how can you prevent it? And after you've learned how to deal with it, how can you prevent it?
Yeah. And in addition to that, I think how can you take what should be a bad customer experience from someone receiving the wrong piece or whatever, and how can you turn that around and create a positive customer experience where they're happy, not only with the fact that they got what they wanted, but just in general with the service they received. Exactly.
Every negative experience that a customer has is potentially an opportunity to turn them into a favorite customer, right? Because most customers you're not going to have a lot of interaction with. But if a customer reaches out to you about a complaint, right there is an interaction that you can make a unique and personal connection with them. And I'm not saying you should engineer bad decisions or bad instances. You absolutely shouldn't. But in the inevitable event that one pops up, that is an opportunity for you to try and create a customer for life. And so you really should be looking at it as, at least in our business, the most direct sales opportunity that you have. Right.
How can you please someone so they want to come back in the future?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think the first thing to understand is that no matter what, you cannot guarantee that you're never going to have to interact with your customers in a negative situation. Especially with the business we're in, the amount of mistakes that can happen are just incredibly high. So we obviously try to avoid those in the first place altogether, but it is impossible to prevent everything. So there's always, in pretty much any business, going to be some sort of interaction. Now, the key here, I think, is understanding and, let's say, for example, you send out an order and the customer reaches out and you see that, hey, I'm missing this item from my order. Or this is the wrong color or the wrong piece or it's broken or whatever it is. The first thing, at least in my opinion, and the thing I kind of consciously just do is really just empathize with that customer and understand from their perspective why this is an inconvenience for their day, for their order, for really everything. For example, if something is the wrong color, they ordered something obviously in a certain color or something that they wanted specifically, and now unfortunately they don't have that. So really, no matter what they say, whether it's really polite or even obviously there are some customers who just reach out very upset instantly and they go straight to the extreme of, I'm going to post negative feedback if you don't fix this or whatever it is.
Which I like to say is very, very, very rare, and we'll get to that a little bit later.
Yeah, that doesn't happen too often. But I think that's important to no matter how the email is written to you, to then take it in from the customer's perspective of understanding something is wrong and they're unhappy about it.
Yeah, and I think just saying, oh, they got the wrong color or whatever, can be a little bit too abstract. You got to think about it in terms of they might be on a timeline in terms of they're trying to build something for someone, or it might be that they have a ton of orders coming in from a bunch of stores, and before they can continue building for the next piece, they need your piece. And so it's not just that you have added something, it's not like you've added a minor inconvenience that it doesn't matter if it takes a couple of days. It might be that you're holding up potentially hundreds of dollars that they've spent in other stores, right? And that makes it a lot more annoying, if you imagine that, that potential. So, empathizing with the customer also really means trying to imagine, not just in an abstract way, but in a really concrete way of, here is something that might have happened, and how can that, how would I feel in a similar situation? And you might be the kind of person, a little bit like I am, where it's like, okay, my package is going to be a week late, whatever, I'll just deal with life, right? And I don't really get that upset. But you got to think about it in terms, that just means that you need to escalate it then and think in terms of, what if this was something that was really important? I was leaving on a vacation soon and I really needed this item, and then it didn't show up, right? So you always got to try and create that emotion to empathize with the customer.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to fixing that problem then, and maybe this is where we kind of head into, if you want, into that potentially negative, that person coming first at you, and being really, really upset. Not just, the majority of the emails we get are like, hello, I placed an order. I just had the opportunity to look through it. Unfortunately, X piece was X color and I ordered Y. Or X piece was broken, or whatever it might be. And the majority of them end the email with, what can we do to resolve this? Or how can you help fix this problem? Whatever it is. They're really just curious and just letting us know that something's wrong and seeing what the options are. Because the majority of buyers out there just want to get their problem fixed. They're really not upset. Correct. They understand things happen. So I think it's extremely important to say that as a precursor to what we're about to get into, which is the customers coming at you with a really negative beginning.
And I do want to talk really quickly before we get at that about the fact that almost all the time, in our experience, the customer has been factually correct. And I want to emphasize factually there. That means that they claim a piece is broken, and almost universally everyone would agree that piece is broken. Right?
There's a crack in the torso. There's a crack in the arm. I can't think of a time where the customer has been factually wrong and unwilling to admit it. I can think of times where the customer has been factually wrong and was corrected politely, which we'll get to later, and as something, how to go about that. But I can't ever think of something where the customer was fraudulently or just so wrong in such a way that it was incorrectable. So just, you should really go into it with the assumption that the customer is telling the truth. Right. The vast majority of customers are. There are, of course, some people out there who might order, say, a minifig and say it was damaged during shipping. And then, if it's an expensive piece, usually, most people I think would ask for a photo or something of it. And then when they decline to send a photo or something like that, that's when you can start to build up this little thing as to like, okay, maybe they're not telling the truth. But rarely, if ever, have we definitely had one, which was an escalation of something very quickly before we even had the opportunity to fix it. But for the most part, we have not experienced anyone intentionally trying to get more from us.
Correct.
Obviously, I think there are some people out there who do that, and some stores out there who have definitely experienced that. And
basically, the core of what I was trying to say is, until things get to the point where it's just so weird that until it gets to the point where you're going to lose a lot of money, it's probably best to just accept that the customer's telling the truth, because you got to think about the time investment here. Is it really worth the time to try and figure out the truth about this? If you think, if you want to investigate every single torso crack, you're going to be spending all of your time dealing with customer service. You're not going to make any customers happy, and you're not going to have any time to upload more torsos. And wow, I just have something in my throat here. But the main thing there is just, we don't ask for photos for every cracked torso. If it's like $100 fig, we will, and we have. But for the most part, we just take them at their word.
Yeah. So. I think something else with that too, and I know we're straying slightly off customer service here. Part of us requesting something from the customer, part of it is maybe proof in terms of what they're saying, but another part of it is actually for us to understand that person's perspective as to what was incorrect about it. I don't know if we want to get into the orange order right now.
I think it'll come up again in a better spot.
Yeah.
But just very quickly, not about that order, but just in general, a lot of the times I will reach out to a customer, say, hey, I'm going to go through with the refund or whatever. Say I'm going to do the refund or the replacement parts or whatever, and then still request a photo. And I do that sometimes if I'm a little suspicious and I just kind of want to know. I'm still going to issue the refund, but just if something kind of lets me know that something's a little fishy, I will issue the refund if it's a small amount and still request a photo, because then I will have spent $5 or whatever on the refund. And if it was a lie, then you just block the customer, which has never happened before. The photos have always come back and clearly been accurate. But that is a way. And also, it is really just about trying to understand what the quality standards are. If people are routinely saying your pieces are damaged, then you should be asking for photos, because that indicates that you as a store are, well, bluntly doing something wrong, right? You know,
and we have the opportunity now to fix that, and to understand that the majority of customers don't like XYZ, and then we can fix that.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, no, most of the customers have a truthful complaint, even when they come at you, I think, with, I'll say a threat of saying, hey, you sent me this wrong piece. I was going to post negative feedback, but if you fix it, or not even that, that's even a little more polite than some of the ones we get. Some of them are like, I'm posting negative feedback. I need this piece, or like just very to the point, slightly rude.
Much more common though is where someone is just, and this is where it's really hard to tell whether it's just a lack of social skills versus aggression, is the really, really to the point, blunt emails where it's one line of, my piece is missing. What do we do about this? And those are one of those emails where it's kind of hard to get a read as to whether the person's being aggressive or whether they're just being quick, right? And I would say a lot of the time they are just being quick, but you know,
reading that sometimes takes you out and you're like, okay.
This is going to be one of those.
You don't necessarily want to deal with it now.
Yeah.
However, there's nothing that we have not dealt with in terms of customer service, unless it occasionally ahead of time, people will email us, and I'm sure people out there have had this, where they send, before they place an order, they send you like a list of parts, and they're like, do you have these pieces in your store? You know, we won't always get back to those because realistically it's not worth our time.
Photos are another thing. Depends on the piece. I usually send photos for something that's worth a little bit. I'll usually open the email, see if it's a photo request for 100 pieces. I'm not doing that.
Right.
But if it's just one piece, like a Django Fett helmet or something, I will usually respond to that because
it's a $90 piece.
Yeah.
Clearly, this person wants to make sure they're getting something that they want ahead of time. In my opinion, that is understandable from the customer's perspective.
Also, something that is a big motivator on that is whether or not I recognize the username. If there's someone who orders from us all the time, almost all the time, I will reply with the photo or whatever, even if I think it's a little bit silly, just because
they're a valued customer who is returning. And
now, something about the expensive parts, and this is where I don't know whether it is worth sending a photo, is I really can't pinpoint an example as to where the individual that asked for the photo committed to the sale. It's usually that it gets bought by someone else.
Yes. So generally, I would say when we upload something expensive, since we don't always like up the price a lot, we just upload it as whatever, you know, our pricing strategy is. Someone will email us, and then it takes us, you know, it's not, you know, we try to reply to emails very quickly, but in all honesty, that type of email is not a priority in the beginning of the day. So for example, there might be something along the lines of like, we come in the morning, we pack orders and stuff, and then we see through our emails that there's a few orders that were missing pieces. We also see someone wants a photo, but we're going to go fulfill those missing piece requests prior to doing that photo, and maybe we don't get to it that day. So usually it does sell ahead of time because it's not even in our inventory that long, which, you know, part of me feels bad on because we did make the effort to try to get this person the sale, but we're not going to, you know, there is a reserve feature on BrickLink where you can actually reserve it for a customer. We've never used that, to my knowledge.
I don't think we've ever had a request either.
No, we haven't. But yeah, so there is that where usually it goes quickly, but occasionally we'll send a photo and someone will say, "Oh, cool," and then they'll actually buy it. But that doesn't happen a whole lot. But yeah, other than the photo requests that make sense for us to send a photo for, we don't respond to a whole lot of it's definitely not a priority for us to respond to customer emails that are potential customer emails that don't seem like they're worth our time, in the sense of they send us a long list of pieces. We can't go check our inventory for that without a confirmed sale. It doesn't make any sense.
Also, what annoys me about those, and I know we talked about just venting or complaining, but the thing about those is we consolidate. Our store is not difficult to look through.
Even
There's
if you
also
don't
a
consolidate,
wanted list.
Well, not even that. Them typing the part numbers and the color and everything into the email is more work than them typing it into the search bar in our store. And then if they see it, they add it to their cart. And if they don't see it, it's not in our store then.
I think maybe that's the motivation behind some of those emails. Is people are hoping that we have it on back order or in our back stock, which I'm even less likely to go check.
No, it doesn't make any financial sense for us to spend time doing that.
So I guess there's our limit on customer service.
Yeah, we do have a limit. And we'll get into kind of how far we go in terms of if there is a problem, which we, specifically me, I go like extremely far to help out the customer. At some point, potentially too far, which, when we get into some of the examples in a little bit, I have a feeling there will be some discussion in the comment section, or whether it's in the Discord or something, or if you're listening to this on a platform, you can go over to YouTube, and if you want to be part of a customer service, I have a feeling there will be people that, obviously put their opinions in the comments on this one, as to we are doing way too much, which I'm sure to some extent we might be. And, part of that is understanding what the customer is really worth. I know we didn't get through the whole thing. We'll come back to the negative thing. We're jumping all over the place here, but we're really trying to figure out, and we don't have a dollar amount associated with it, but what is the value of a customer? For us, it does not there's no acquisition cost to get a customer, because we're not doing any sort of advertising.
Correct.
There's no salespeople. It doesn't actually cost us anything to get a customer. So
that's not entirely true. We do have the YouTube channel, but besides that, we do kind of have a brand, and we do have word of mouth, which is something we're going to talk about later. But there is a little bit of cost in terms of having higher quality, uploading consistently and regularly. There are factors that go into getting a sale. It's just we don't have a dedicated advertising budget.
Correct, but I would also argue that adding parts, it also benefits your existing customers. Whereas if you're advertising, it probably isn't. Maybe you have an existing customer who forgot about you.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think, for the most part, there theoretically is no acquisition cost for a customer that is a direct out-of-pocket expense that isn't benefiting the company as a whole.
Yeah.
So that's partially why it's difficult for us to determine a customer value when it comes to, like, if someone reached out to us and they're missing one piece in their order. I know a lot of stores, and again, this is just our take. There's no right or wrong way to do this necessarily, unless you just don't do anything about a problem, in which case I would consider that to be incorrect if they've paid for a product and they didn't receive it and you don't do anything about it. However, a lot of people just refund the part because it doesn't make sense to pick the piece, to go put it in a bubble mailer or whatever, and to ship it off for $4 because the part was only 12 cents. And so a lot of people just refund the 12 cents.
Yeah.
Now, from my perspective as a customer, not that I've actually ever been on that side where I've had a missing piece, or maybe I have, I don't remember exactly. But to me, from that perspective, I would not want a 12 cent refund, because I don't actually have the ability to use that 12 cents and go get the one piece I was missing and not have to put in more out-of-pocket expenses. So what we do is if we have the piece, we try to ship it out. That's our first priority. Is we want to fix that problem. You're missing a piece. We're gonna give it to you. If we do not have that piece, we sometimes will refund, and we'll refund the cost of the piece. But then I almost always, pretty much always do a shipping adjustment. So I'll send an additional few dollars to that person in addition to the cost of their piece, so that they hopefully, obviously shipping costs and stuff, we don't refund the entirety of shipping, but we'll give a few dollar adjustment so that hopefully they can go get it from another store with limited out-of-pocket expenses for our mistake. It shouldn't cost the customer, if we refund them 12 cents, it shouldn't cost them $5 more to ship a piece from another store to get it to them. So we make it cost $1 more or something.
Yeah, we kind of, at least I kind of have these little brackets. I don't want to actually say what they are because, I don't want to get a sudden flood of missing pieces. But just after I talked about customers always being honest. But I kind of have this basic rule where if I'm only going to be refunding X amount, then I will bump it to Y. And I kind of have these little brackets.
Right.
Just to make it easy, because I'm not going to sit down and do math. That's a waste of my time. I'm just going to go ahead, eyeball it, and say, I think the customer would be satisfied with about this amount.
Right. Something I've started doing, which is actually pretty recent, and you know this, but within the past month or so, I've actually started kind of, if we don't have the piece and it feels like a part that is worth something to the customer, it's not like a 1x2. Here's the thing, I guess. If in my mind this customer is going to go purchase this piece from another store in another order that they already are placing, and it's very easy to do that, I don't have a problem with just the refund. However, if it's like a minifig, for example, and that's probably the reason they came to our store, I will actually do the work for the customer in terms of going to another store, purchasing that minifig, and having it shipped directly to them. Now, of course, I tell them, hey, this is shipping to you from this store. If anything is wrong, please don't reach out to them, reach out to us, and we will then solve the problem. We've never, fortunately, because that would then be very frustrating to the customer, I'm sure. We've never had to fix a problem from another store that was sent to us or that was shipped directly to the customer. So like recently, the other day, or a couple weeks ago, we had a Canadian order. We shipped it. We were missing 2 pins that were, I don't know, two things. And we don't have that in our inventory. And I didn't really, it felt like a piece where it's like, okay, it was a really small order. So, I'm not entirely sure how we missed it either. It was not like a massive order. So somehow we missed those pieces on the verification step. And we didn't have them, which probably meant they went in a different order. So I decided I was going to go place an order and have it shipped directly to him within Canada. So it wasn't from the US to Canada or anything costing us more, but it was cheaper to do that in my mind than it was to give him, or it was similar amount. It was like $6 when the pieces alone were like $3 and the shipping was super cheap. So I just figured we'll do that. And that's, in my mind, taking that extra step to make it so the customer doesn't have to do any work. And actually, he just emailed us this morning, I think, and said, like, you didn't have to do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I saw that.
Here it is. Yeah, I really didn't expect that, so I really appreciate your efforts. And maybe that's too far, but from my perspective as a customer, I prefer that because I didn't have to do anything. I am waiting a little longer, but it didn't cost me anything, and I'm not having to go do work to make this order get fulfilled.
And I mean, maybe not necessarily because it's an international order, but in general, something like that I think is far more likely to generate a second sale and a third sale and a fourth sale, which will then pay for and more the original cost.
And that comes into figuring out what the customer is worth. Is I went and spent maybe $8 on this person right now. However, if he remembers us because it was no work for him or anything, and he comes back and places a $20 order, was that $8 worth? Is that an acquisition cost now for that customer, which in other businesses would be in terms of advertising and how much it costs to sign a new customer or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way I look at it. I theoretically hope to make a customer for life. Obviously, on the BrickLink and BrickOwl platforms, people don't exclusively buy from a store because you can't get everything from there. But my thought is, as much as possible, if we can build and push the brand name into their head and they have a happy understanding of what we do and how we do it, and they like the way we treat everything, then my thought is they might come to us first. Yeah. And hopefully get as much as they can from us.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And on the whole loyalty thing is something that is true for a lot of other industries, is where you can build a loyalty thing where someone is only going to buy from you. But that's not really true for us. So for us, loyalty is more about, like Evan said, the preferential purchasing. And because of how wanted list purchases work, you can filter to a specific store. And so it's even then, even though we do definitely believe that most orders that come in on the platform are wanted list, magic orders, it definitely still has an effect trying to get your name recognized, because somebody's going to pick your store over someone else to shop at with the wanted list.
Right.
So,
That's the hope with the concept of fixing a customer's problems. Or not a customer's problems. We cause the problem, but fixing what we can for them to the best of our ability.
And it's time for every episode. I feel like I do a hard segue, so I'm going to do a really hard segue here. Upset customers, which is something that we meant to talk about, and we kind of skipped a little bit, is what happens, when it has to be more than just one response email of, oh, I'm sorry, here's a tracking number, and it becomes a thing. Now, a thing does not always necessarily mean that the customer is unwilling to be, unwilling to be placated. There can be the customer is upset and it takes multiple messages to make them happy, and they are correct in every capacity along that steps because it was a multi-level problem, or there's just multiple steps. And so we're going to talk about both situations where it just takes multiple steps, and where a normal average person, or at least us, would consider the problem have been dealt with, but in the customer's mind, the problem is still there. And that's not to say the customer is wrong, because we are going to talk about because we often hear this phrase, if the customer is always right. So that doesn't necessarily mean the customer is always factually correct. Mm-hmm. It means the customer is always right in a philosophical sense. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But first, dealing with upset customers, I think, is... We spent a lot of time talking about, my first bullet point here is the 99% rule of customer is almost always factually correct. And I do really want to stress that when you encounter a customer who's hostile, we personally have never had to fight with them, which I suppose is the golden rule, is you should never, especially in an online retail business, there's no excuse to argue with a customer. In person, if you run a brick and mortar store, there's almost no excuse. But obviously, if someone is threatening to harm your customers, or threatening to harm your employees, or causing a scene, eventually there's a point where you have to say, you need to leave the store or we're going to call the police, right? Eventually there is that level. But for an online retailer, especially if you're shipping with a PO box, there's nothing that they can do.
There is, I think there is a degree at which if the customer gets upset enough, you do need to stand up for the business. However,
correct.
I don't think it's likely that anything will get there unless you are rude to them on your first response.
Correct.
Or something, and you escalate it from there.
Correct. But I'm talking more in the sense that the customer keeps going after you. I don't really think there's many situations where that can't be solved simply by ignoring the customer or reporting them or blocking them, right? I mean, obviously, yes, sure, someone can, I'm trying to really pull out of the hat here, but someone can threaten to come find you. At that point, maybe I would do something.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen. And really, at that point, you should contact BrickLink customer service immediately. That's a bit extreme. So I'm not really going to talk about that. But just in general, customers being a pain, right? Or they're cursing at you or whatever, which we've never had before. But just even at like the extreme, but still possibly could happen level, you as the business owner in an online retail store, it's never going to look good if you do the same thing. Because if, let's just say somehow that entire email chain got posted to Facebook and the customer's screaming at you and you're being polite the entire time, my assumption is most people are probably going to take your side. But if the customer is yelling at you and you swear at them once and then they cut out most of it and it's just you swearing at them, now you can't really argue against that and say, hey, that's not an accurate representation. But if you just never say anything that can be taken out of context in a negative way, if you're just always polite and always accurate and always truthful, then the customer can't really do anything about it except to make themselves look bad.
I think that's incredibly uncommon too. Just that it would ever get to that extent where it would be posted somewhere to try to ruin your business. I think that's incredibly unlikely.
I talked about this in our customer service video that I made a long time ago, where I kind of entertained that same thought experiment, but I can't recall. Well, it certainly never happened to us, but I can't really recall it happening to anyone that I know.
Right.
And I can't recall it ever being talked about in our Discord. It doesn't mean that it hasn't been. I don't read every message, but
if you've had bad customer service experiences and you're watching this on YouTube and you can comment, I think we'd be curious from a seller's perspective. Obviously, there's a lot from a buyer's perspective, I think. But however, if you're a buyer too, I guess it'd be interesting to hear.
Now, what I hope doesn't happen is seller and buyer
in the same thing.
But if you on either end have a true horror story, in the sense of not just, oh, this customer is being annoying, or, oh, this buyer is being annoying, but something that's like, wow. I would like, it would be a nice comment, but please remove any names or personally identifying information. Including usernames. It's just, we've never had, I guess the core thing I'm trying to say here is we've never had to fight with a customer, and we've never had to escalate things with a customer before over email. We've always been able to come to a peaceful resolution, or the customer has decided that they are done interacting with us.
I think what's important, though, is to understand the concept that while don't fight with the customer does not mean don't educate the customer. Because we recently had an order that was almost entirely pearl gold and lots of pieces. And every seller out there, and probably a lot of buyers, or people who build with Lego in general, who have different sets that have different, pearl gold has a wide variety of colors, really, that come in under that name. So we had shipped 130 pieces, I think, of a 1x2 plate that had a bar on the side, and it was in pearl gold. And when we sent it to this customer, she came back to us. There were other pieces as well, but she came back to us and said, "Hi, thanks for shipping it out so quickly, but unfortunately, I think you sent me metallic gold." And, she had just separated out the darker tone of pearl gold and the lighter tone of pearl gold. And she considered the lighter color to be actual pearl gold and the darker one to be metallic gold. And as a seller, we understand that that's not the case. And, Lego naturally has variances in all their colors and everything. So, that's posted and stuff. But we didn't come back to her and just say, that's just how it is, or those are Lego official colors, too bad. We came back with, and I think you replied actually to this, with really an opportunity to educate this customer on the general colors and stuff of what pearl gold is, metallic gold, and what is it, flat gold, I think is the other one. So we sent a photo to the best of the ability that really outlined the color differences in those pieces, as well as the differences within just pearl gold alone, in that even sometimes in the same exact set, you might have different colors that are slightly different. And not only did we educate her on that and say, here's what it is, but we also then still offered and said, if you'd like, we don't have these pieces, I don't think, but if you'd like, we're willing to, send you a refund, a partial refund for the pieces, because we understand you're not happy. And this would give you the opportunity to go purchase from another store. However, it is likely that when you purchase from another store, this problem
it's going to be there too.
Right. Problem in quotes, because it's not actually a problem, but it's very likely that'll happen again at a different store because pearl golds don't line up. Now, usually if I'm picking a small order and they order 2 pieces and we have 100 in the drawer, I do pull out 2 that look similar. But when they order the entire lot of 100 and something, we couldn't, separate that out. And it is technically the same color.
And in this case, the customer was totally fine with it, and they didn't request a refund. And I have dealt with this pearl gold issue multiple times, and it always comes to the same resolution of the customer has never requested a refund for them. And, so I guess just a couple things, to provide an example, I guess, not that I am the best email writer, because I'm not. I'm going to read a little snippet from the email I sent. Thank you for reaching out to us about our order. And that is something as I try to begin every single order with thank you for being a customer, thank you for being thank you for your business, or
we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to fix the problem, stuff like that.
And unfortunately, the Pearl Gold color has a lot of natural variation, and that's why it looks like there's a couple different colors. And then I said I went ahead and attached a reference guide. So we have a magnifying glass, and so I shot a photo of all of the different colors of pearl next to each other with labels. So that way we can have a reference guide for the future, and then this customer could actually see the real comparison under light in order to get a better understanding, right? So then I said, normally I would not offer this, but seeing as it's the holidays and I wouldn't want Christmas to be ruined. So what I'm trying to do there
for context, the person was building a train with
their kid.
With their kid, I believe.
So, this customer happened to mention the special reason as to why they might be upset. Because in their first email, the customer did say that normally they wouldn't bother emailing about this.
Right, except...
So you got to remember that most people, they're not going to go ahead and say, oh, I'm building a train set with my kid. But that reason is still there, right? They just don't tell you. And so that goes back to kind of how we opened this with there's always a special reason. And there's always a reason to empathize with the customer. And you just sometimes have to imagine what that reason is. But it's still important to try and emotionally attach over that. But normally I would not offer this, seeing it's the holidays and I wouldn't want Christmas to be ruined. I can go ahead and place another order from another store, but unfortunately it's extremely likely you would encounter the same issue. Once again, I'm very sorry for your disappointment. Please let us know if you'd like to go forward with a refund or replacement order. And so I think the key thing throughout all of this is continuously reiterating that, not that I'm sorry about the problem, because there isn't a problem. It's I'm sorry for your disappointment. Or I'm sorry your expectations were unfulfilled. Or, I'm sorry that it was not how you wanted it to be, because that's all factual. And that goes into another big point about the customer is always right, is it's not about the fact. It's about the fact that the customer
believes,
thinks.
Right.
And that's why the customer is always right, because excluding fraud, which we already talked about, is almost non-existent, right? The customer thinks they're right. You're always going to say what you think is right and what you think is the fact. So it's a fact that the customer is disappointed. You can't argue with that. You can argue that the core issue is false, but you can't argue that the customer is upset, and you can't argue that the customer is now hurt. And in that way, the customer is always right. And so when dealing with an issue like this, you have to try and figure out a way to change the customer's issue into something that you can solve. Because if a customer emails me and says, I'm upset that the sky is blue, unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about that. But I can try and turn their problem into a different problem, which I can then solve, right? I can say, maybe you should wear sunglasses. I don't know. But, just random question, a random thing there. In this case, I turned it into something that I can solve by educating the customer and then solving that lack of education and then providing a solution for them to go forward. And in that way, the issue is not that they got the wrong color. The issue is that they're upset. I was able to solve the issue of them being upset. That was a very long circular thing, but
right.
That's really what the core is.
Yeah. So we have another one here from a customer who reached out and essentially, started off very stern with, I have significant problems with this order. I'm reaching out before leaving negative feedback, etc. So at least they did reach out, of course. We have had one customer, actually a couple customers who have left negative feedback without reaching out, and then that automatically makes us then reach out to them, determine what the problem was, fix the problem, and then ultimately they usually remove their negative feedback. So I guess I appreciate anyone who reaches out prior to that, but it is interesting that some people, and this might just be, and I was getting to that with this email, this might just be the concept of some buyers have bad experiences with sellers on BrickLink or any platform, I guess, which automatically makes them then just think, okay, the majority of buyers don't want to, or the majority of sellers don't want to help me. So I got a wrong piece, negative feedback. Or they've had a hard problem with customer service in the past. They did reach out. It took a long time to get something resolved, so they reach out and they have to initially threaten that negative feedback. We are usually very willing, actually extremely willing to fix almost anything. But I have a feeling there are some sellers out there who don't, or they don't fulfill the complete request of whatever the buyer was really hoping for, and they make it difficult for the buyer. And that is part of the reason the buyers have to come off as aggressive in order to get, because they think that's how they have to in order to get something solved. That's not the case for us in most cases. If anyone says, hey, I'm missing this piece, any chance you can ship it out? Absolutely. Of course we can. We'll ship it out right now. And that's usually what it is. But this specific person, started off very stern with, hey, significant problems. I'm doing this before leaving negative feedback. And this one was interesting because they were talking about significant color variations with their bricks. And this is not something we've really heard of before.
Outside of the
known colors that have this. So colors that were listed here: orange, yellow, dark turquoise, red, lime green, magenta, bright light orange. Now this was a fairly decent sized order, not massive, but this person had only ordered 10 to 12 of each of these pieces. So like orange 1x6, orange 1x4, 1x3, 1x2, yellow, and then the other colors I read, but only ordered 10 to 12, maybe 15 of a lot or two. So it was really weird that they were complaining about significant color variances.
Yeah, because our general policy is if someone orders 1,000 of something, if someone buys out a lot and there's a lot of it, we're just going to dump it. And we overestimate some of our lots we underestimate some of our lots, meaning that there are extra pieces in there. So that way, if someone orders an extremely monumental quantity of something and they buy out the lot, we know that they're going to get some in there that aren't fantastic, but there are so many extra in there that it should even out. And we do dump it out and take a quick look. But if someone orders 5,000 white 1x2s, there is going to be, there's probably going to be at least one non-Lego in there, and there's definitely going to be a couple that are scratched and chewed on.
Of course.
But the fact that there's probably actually for 5,000 it might be as high as 5,100 in there, right? Then they'll be fine. And
but for these smaller orders, when there's only 10 to 12,
we do check, and so it's very odd that this happened.
Yeah. So then, I got back to this customer and said, I'm really sorry to hear that you have some problems with your order. And this person said they've never had significant color variations. So I then said, just like you, we've never had any single order with so many issues before. I'm more than happy to ship out the replacement parts for you. This initially, there are also a couple pieces in here that were damaged. I didn't read, but that's what I said. I'm more than happy to ship out the replacement parts for you, including the lots that you have informed have significant color issues. Because I thought, we will make an effort to resolve this, even though the majority of people would probably say Lego has natural variances. These are used pieces, so they're completely different ages and everything. But I said, we'll ship that out for you. I asked a separate question regarding a piece that this person had not ordered, which was a little confusing and a little off-putting too. It made me wonder, is this really the order she meant to ask for? Is she trying to get something else out of us? But, I said, did you mean this or what did you mean by this? And then she clarified. And then I said, when I hear back, I'll pick the final lot for you and ship out the package. Inside the package, though, I will also be including an additional shipping label for you to send back the parts that you're not happy with. So this provided two things then. Well, it costs us more money, but we'll get to that in a minute. But the first thing is, it made sure that this customer was not just getting double the parts that she ordered, because she now needed to send back the pieces that she was not happy with.
Yeah, we were pretty confident that we would be able to put those pieces right back into our inventory.
Right. Now, in addition to that, what was the second thing? So she didn't get double the pieces. Oh, I know what it was. And now we get the pieces back. So if there really are very significant color variations, we are able to look at them and determine whether this is a true problem or if this customer specifically just wanted the same color, in which case I would in the future recommend she purchase new, not used. But then, of course, I ended with thank you so much for giving giving us the opportunity to fix this problem. We're again so sorry that there were so many mistakes with your order. We are taking full responsibility for the color problems here, just to make this customer happy, even though the initial email was, I wouldn't say incredibly rude, but very stern, very to the point, very off-putting when you and I read it. We talked about it before we replied, and it was like, what is this person thinking? Like, they all have natural colors. Do you think they're trying to do this, this, and this? And that was the decision that said, okay, she has to for sure send the pieces back.
It's never great when the subject line is significant issues with this order.
Right. And we've never had that. That's the thing. Like, that was a crazy one. So this is where, we had thought about this customer in a negative aspect. We were still going to fix the problem, but we had very much an opinion of this person, and we're like, okay, this is not a customer that's the best to deal with. This person follows up and, incredibly nicely, very interesting, complete tone change from that first email. And I think the reason for that is this customer must have had a bad experience with other stores, maybe a similar situation where she wasn't happy with the colors and that person said, sorry, whatever, your problem. And then, whatever happened after that. But the tone completely changed now, where she was very happy. She, said what the problem was, and then was wondering, is there a date on the return label? Do I need to send it back? Whatever. And then I replied and said they've all been packed up and shipped. I sent the shipping information, and then I said there is a return label, though the date inside doesn't need to be, whatever. And then I followed up again when there was an estimated delivery date, and then I went and checked that tracking, and I proactively emailed her and said, hello again. I noticed that your package with the replacement part was delivered on Saturday. I just want to be sure that they meet your expectations and you're happy with those replacement parts. Because I really wanted to make sure that proactively, we were not just throwing this away. Mm-hmm. We were still continuing to talk with this customer and make sure everything's happy. She then replied and said, it looks great. And also sent a photo of the differences in the parts, which there is a visible difference. We actually, it is in our PO box, so we can actually go get it, and we'll really look at this in person. She wasn't able to send the other colors. She sent the orange, and the oranges do look different, but she wasn't able to send the other colors because she said you couldn't see the difference on camera. In my opinion, then there's not enough of a difference, but we'll see when we go through the PO box and stuff and look at the items. But she did include a picture, and then she said, something along the lines of like, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make it to the post office until Wednesday because I don't have a car or something and I need a friend to come drop me off. And so at this point, most people I think would say, okay, no problem. Drop it off whenever you can. But I went one step further. And again, this is probably too much, but I was at dinner with you and a friend the other night. And I replied and said, that's great to hear. Honestly, no rush on the shipping at all. You can actually go to the USPS website and request a package pickup, which should be no cost to you, and then hopefully you don't even need to leave your house. And I sent the link, which she could do. Again, no rush on the shipping. Thank you very much for your order and helping us improve our quality. So again, thank you for the order, and thank you for helping us improve, which might be the case when it comes back. Maybe these are totally wrong. However, they did get added to the inventory and picked and verified and sent out, so we'll see. And then the next day she replied and said picked up or pickup scheduled for tomorrow. But I took, we went one extra step, even more so than we really needed to, and told the customer, you don't even have to leave your house to ship this back, which was really not required in any sense. And when we were at dinner that night, I remember being like, it's so easy to be nice and to make someone else's life easier. Now, if this person had not ordered from us, and again, this was a fairly decent sized order. It wasn't massive, but it wasn't like $12. This customer theoretically now knows this really, I would think, a very nice interaction with the company and would think to come back to us in the future. So I was very happy when I sent that email, and I was like, it's so easy. To me, it's frustrating that some sellers out there, and of course, whatever your policy is for your store and however you want to do it is the way to do it, but it's so easy to be nice and to help the customer, and in my mind, to make a customer for life, theoretically. And this was an interesting one because it started out very negative, and by the end was completely resolved and, theoretically even helped us out when we go get those pieces and see the quality.
The other thing is it didn't take, obviously this took more time than the average customer service thing, but it's not like we were subtracting hours from our productivity.
Course. Right.
It was 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there. It was not over.
In terms of
did not cost us hundreds of dollars.
No, the time investment itself was, total, I'd say 15 minutes
Mm-hmm.
when you count going and picking the parts and stuff and looking at it and shipping it out. And then of course there was the cost of probably of 2 shipping labels, which I think this person was close. So they were only probably about $4 each. But so, you know, $12 when you count the time, maybe up to 15 absolute maximum dollars, which includes shipping and time, to hopefully get a customer again in the future.
Yeah.
You know,
I really should have put my phone on Do Not Disturb.
you should have, and we'll see. But you know, in my mind, and I have a feeling a lot of people on this one are going to say they would never do that because the pieces have natural color variation and whatever. But I don't know. I feel like it's better to help the customer out to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
When you can.
Yeah, and this is definitely something Evan and I have disagreed on a little in terms of the customer satisfaction. I definitely fully agree that you should always be nice to the customer and you should always go an extra mile. But Evan and I have at times argued over how many extra miles. And in this particular case, I don't think that Evan did. You know, I think
it didn't
he spent
cost anything.
the correct amount of time. But, you know, just in terms of things that become part of routine where it takes longer, you know, in terms of like how careful do you want to be on your quality? You know, how well do you want to structure your packing, right? There are little things there that we have definitely argued over. And so there is definitely a diversity of opinion. And at some point, as these arguments become more common, we're going to have to figure out what the worth of a customer is. Mm-hmm. And we aren't really sure how to calculate that. But it is very important to understand that this is going to be one of those things where I said never say anything that can be taken out of context. But I'm about to say something that can be taken out of context. People have a dollar value attached to them. And that dollar value is only relevant in terms of them spending money in the future. But when you're talking to them right now, you're not dealing with their dollar value in the future. You're dealing with the money that they've already spent. And you're dealing with them as a person. And that is why it is so crucial to take the minute to be polite or to have basic human decency. Because although in this case, I do think that shipping out the parts was the correct thing to do, I could envision a very similar situation where I would essentially say, tough luck, but I would never say tough luck, right?
Of course
I would
not.
always go the extra mile to try and provide. I might be willing to say, I'm willing to order these parts from another store. It's just not worth it for me to go ahead and, you know, if we don't have the parts or something like that, where it's a situation where it's not worth my time to completely solve the problem. But in that situation, I still need to remember that, or, you know, any seller should remember that you're not just dealing with the future cost. You're not just dealing with the future revenue. You're also dealing with the human being on the other side of the screen. And there's no reason to make someone's life worse than you have to. If you have to let someone down, just from a basic human perspective, you should do so in the most polite way possible. And that's where I think the core of customer service really is about, you know, customer service in the sense of you've encountered a problem, but it's in making something bad as good as it can be while still being bad, you know, in terms of not ruining someone's day.
Yeah, and I would almost say that's similar to the Pearl Gold situation.
Yeah.
Where we did provide an extra solution. However, we told them, you know, the honest truth here is that the pieces you have, unfortunately, are the pieces you ordered. And that is actually how they come. Mm-hmm. And there is no true fix for this. Here's an option. And then, of course, they went with, oh, okay, thank you. And they understood the situation. Mm-hmm. So there is that sense, too, where you let them down in the nicest way you could by telling them the truth of how it actually, how it was.
And something else very similar to that is a customer we've had for forever. Originally came to us because they ordered the correct color, but they thought the color name was different, dark red and reddish brown.
Right.
And that's kind of the similar thing, is the customer was wrong, and we dealt with it in such a way that they purchased from us again and again and again and again and again.
He's placed 38 something orders. Yeah.
And that is...
It could have been tied back to that initial interaction of us not being rude about saying you ordered the same color, but educating that person. And we probably were still offering to say, hey, we'll send you out the pieces that you actually wanted.
Yeah.
Even though they ordered the wrong ones, it was completely their fault. We still wanted to make them happy. I mean, actually, I'm very curious if we did. We probably did send out the pieces they wanted in the right color, even though that was a complete cost to us.
At the very least, I'm confident we would have offered.
Yeah. And then now we have a customer, actually, what I would consider for life, because this person's been buying us for over a year. I
don't want to kind of admit it, but we have messed up some of his other orders in the past, like actually messed up in terms of we made an error, and he has still continued to buy from us through, if you place 38 orders, I don't want to say, well, it is an awful error average, but for some reason the errors just seem to condense around his orders.
He's
which
probably
sucks.
had like 3 errors,
which is
awful.
Bad.
But he's always, again, we fix it instantly.
Yeah.
Like usually same day. There are, that's something else. We really try to the best of our ability to get to customer service within 24 hours. Now, there are sometimes, the weekends are no guarantee. Sundays, generally, we don't do anything. Saturdays, sometimes we will. But if we're not, then you might email us on Friday and we don't get to it until Monday. And sometimes, there's too many emails, or very occasionally,
we miss an email.
We read the email and we don't reply in the moment. And then someone else clicks off that email and it's now marked as read, so it doesn't have a notification with it, and we miss it. And then they have to email us a second time. And then we're like, oh, I'm so sorry.
And that is probably the most justified times that we've seen customers angry, in terms of where we get hostile. It's still very rare, but in terms of a customer being hostile back, is when we accidentally ignore their message.
Yes, I think that's understandable, but we don't get a whole lot.
No, it's usually
mad.
Extremely understandable. But that's like, in our minds,
that's a big
worst
problem.
Mistake that can happen, because you have essentially told your customer, from their perspective, sorry, you're not worth my time.
Right.
And obviously bad. Sometimes mistakes do just happen. But
I think that's what contributes to the customers who reach out very sternly, though, is people, including ourselves occasionally, not replying quickly, not making them a priority, not fulfilling not fixing their issue. I think that's the the thing here. So I think, obviously, however everyone wants to do it, but I think if everyone in general had a better customer service perspective, or customer service policy type thing, and obviously we don't have anyone working for us right now in that customer service role.
Mm-hmm.
So to an extent, we can do whatever we want. If I wanted to refund someone's whole order for no reason, I could, and you'd be mad at me, but I'm not going to get fired or anything.
No.
If someone in that customer service perspective or position, at that point, if we have someone there whose job that is, we do then need to really determine what is the policy for each thing. And that's part of the reason I think right now we're able to be so I don't want to say good with customer service, but so free in terms of making them happy, because we can pretty much do whatever we want as the owners.
And we also know what the books are like. And so
we know if we can afford more refunds this month.
we know whether or not we can afford to go the extra mile on, basically we know how many times we can afford to go the extra mile is I guess the way to look at it, is because there are some customers who fit into the qualification of, I feel awful about this, I'm going to go multiple extra miles, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there are other customers where I might be like, they're going to be satisfied with what I did. Do I really need to go many more extra miles, right? And that's where it's like, if, being the business owner, we can accurately determine whether or not that's okay to do. But if you have someone who has to follow all of these rules and policies, you can't scope all of that out. So
yeah, so you have to. I think we'll have to give that person, if someone at some point has that, we'll have to give them some leeway in terms of what we allow them to do and not do in terms of their own opinion of what they should do in that situation. But we have a rough policy of like, we don't refund less than this amount, and a rough policy of, if we have the piece, of course we're going to ship it out immediately, pretty much that day usually. So there are policies that are just not written that we do, but there's nothing like, for example, the color difference in orange pieces.
Yeah.
So that would be something where that person would have to use their judgment or talk to us or something, because that was a new one for us the other day. That was very recent too. That was only resolved in the past like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. The other thing is the frequency. That's a very rare issue. But if that was a common issue, common in the sense of our quality standards were almost perfect and people were still just, first of all, that would indicate to us that something is incorrect. So something is wrong in the process. Right. But let's just say that for some reason, BrickLink got a huge influx of brand new buyers who didn't understand that there's natural variation. And we had cleaned our inventory up to the point where it was almost perfect. And we started getting a flood of these emails. I would probably be less likely to do what I did or what Evan did for this person for every single one of those emails, because then it's going to cost us a lot. And at that point, we might need to look at other options.
True.
But
because it's so rare, we feel like we can take that extra step.
Exactly. The extreme thing, the case where you need to go, because I would say the extra mile is our normal customer service practice, but multiple extra miles means usually spending lots of money. That isn't necessary most of the time, because most of the time the issue is simple, straightforward, and getting the customer to be satisfied is easy. It's shipping out the part promptly, being polite, and issuing a refund if that's necessary, or buying it from another store if necessary, right? But sending shipping labels, doing all of this complicated stuff usually is not necessary.
Right.
So that's, food for thought as well.
Yeah, and something we discussed earlier as we were trying to plan out this thing was, if you have a customer who's just so unhappy, what's the likelihood or what's the solution for fixing something where they're just not happy whatsoever? What's the last option there in terms of how you can fix it? And the thing there really we decided was absolutely thing, if you just want to get rid of everything and not lose any money on it, is tell the buyer that they can send the pieces back at their cost and you'll refund the cost of the pieces but not the shipping. And not that completely satisfies the buyer, obviously, but it sounds like if you're at that point, you probably can't satisfy the buyer at all. So if that's on your plate where you disagree with their perspective so much so that you're not willing to refund whatever the problem is or whatever it is. So there is that thing. And then I think, I don't know, we've never got to that point where we've had any sort of buyer that's really been too bad where we just couldn't deal with it. We did have one where it was like we missed a piece or 2 pieces in their order or something.
I have it open, so I can take a look here.
Yeah, so 2 pieces were missing. They emailed us, I believe, at 8:41 p.m., I think, at night. And then 11 hours later at 7 a.m. the next morning, we had not yet replied. They then filed an NSS, a non-shipping seller alert on BrickLink, which is not exactly what...
they're supposed to do.
That's not what the NSS is for. That's if you take the money and don't ship anything. And this wasn't that was the only 2 pieces they ordered. It's their order arrived and they were just missing a couple pieces. But they didn't even give us the opportunity to respond at that point. However, we still did, we noticed there was an NSS filed from this customer, but we still replied, or Paul replied in this case and said, sorry for the missing pieces. Here's your shipping label. The parts are shipping today. And you then also said something along the lines
as we always value the business of our buyers and appreciate you letting us know about any failures on our part so we can strive to improve in the future.
Yeah. And you also mentioned the NSS, that's not exactly what this is for.
I actually did not mention that.
To the customer?
To the customer, no.
Oh, I thought you did. Okay.
No, I mentioned that to BrickLink in my customer service to BrickLink email.
However, they never replied to that. The NSS was removed, so I believe the customer actually removed it once they got back.
That's my assumption. I swear that I remember BrickLink emailing me, but I can find no evidence of it, so it must just be... I must not be remembering what actually happened. But the NSS did go away, so that really was the only... But we never received a reply from the customer.
Mm-hmm.
So...
yeah, a little weird.
I'm
curious if we got feedback on that order. We can check after this, maybe.
Yeah, well, the order was more than 6 months ago.
But I think feedback stays with your account.
It does. I just don't know if you can see what order it's associated with.
Well, we haven't. Yeah, you can. It's on that page. I'm curious. That'll be interesting. I don't know if we could scroll through that many pages, but that'd be cool to see that. Yeah. So obviously, like today, what we just talked about was really a take on what we do. And our perspective on customer service and trying to make that customer happy. As mentioned, people are not going to all agree.
No.
But I am curious though to hear, if you don't agree with something, why not? Because people are going to say like, oh, it costs too much money. But think about the acquisition cost of that customer. It didn't cost you anything to get them. And now if you spent $4 to ship out a piece and fix the problem, does that $4 lead to them making another $50 purchase later? And was that $50 purchase worth that $4 now acquisition cost? Now, if you're messing up every order, you got a big problem. And you can't spend $4 additional on every order. But if it happens, in every 50 orders, you have a problem that you have to deal with. Maybe even every 30 orders, you have a problem you have to deal with. I'd say that's still fine as long as you're not spending more than like $20 per problem.
Yeah, unless you're pricing below 6 months sales average, you really should be able to afford to take care of your customers, right? It's kind of the thing of if you can't afford to pay your employees, you shouldn't be in business. And
if you can't afford to take care of your customers, you shouldn't be in business? Yeah,
that's kind of thing too. I don't want to necessarily go as far as that because what take care of, as we've just spent a lot of time talking about, is very diverse. But
yeah,
if you can't afford to spend the minute to be polite to a customer, then you're not generating enough revenue per minute, is kind of how I would look at it, right? And
yeah, and hopefully you are not spending an hour every single day dealing with like 4 problems that come in or 5 problems. Then there's a problem. You have an issue. But I think if you're spending, an hour a week, maybe that's fine. That still sounds like a lot to me. But, coming in the morning and if you see you have an email, you fix that problem there. And generally it's simple enough as you just go pick the 1 or 2 pieces that were missing. You make a label, you email them the label number, and you're done. And it's, I'd say, maximum 5-minute process, unless there's a ton of pieces or something crazy.
Yeah.
So if you're spending more than an hour a week on customer service, because it's actually taking you that long versus you just like going really slow or something, then I'd say there's an issue there. Unless of course you're processing 1,000 orders a week, in which case maybe then at that point that percentage of orders you should spend more than an hour a week working with customer service. But who knows? But yeah, I think we're pretty much wrapping it up here in terms of the customer and stuff. But recap, really, we try to empathize with the customer. I am beyond willing to go the extra mile, sometimes probably too far. And then just understand the customer's perspective, and maybe they're upset because of other experiences they've had, and do your best, in my opinion, to just fix that problem and make them content, because they're probably never going to be happy because you're not actually doing more for them. You're not saying, hey, here's like 100 free pieces. You know what I mean? You're only actually fulfilling what they initially ordered. So they shouldn't be happier than when they placed that order if they had just received the order properly. But they should be content with your solution and happy that it was resolved in a short period of time. That's my opinion, at least.
You should exceed expectations on how the problem is going to be solved.
Exactly. Yeah. Your customer shouldn't come out on top.
Yeah.
Better off than just the order, but they should meet the order minimum.
And something else we talked about is that the customer has a right to be right. Right? They have a right to believe that they're right. And that's really what the customer's right means. And you need to not argue with you need to not argue that the customer feels bad, because they do feel bad. What you need to do is educate on the core fundamental reason as to what they're reaching out to you about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Alrighty. Okay. We do have a little bit of an announcement about the future of the podcast.
Yes.
Coming 2023, we're going to be increasing to 2 times a month. So if you are a fan of this podcast, there will be more content coming out. And if you hate this if you hate this podcast, then
there will still be more content.
There'll still be more content, and I don't know why you're watching it. So you're going out of your way to.
Yeah, you're at the end.
So congratulations on suffering through another podcast. There's some quality customer service right there.
And if you have any suggestions or topics you'd like to hear more in depth about how we handle or what our opinions on, please let us know. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go to any of your favorite podcast platforms and listen to it there. Or if you're on a podcast platform, you can click that subscribe or rate us or something, and that'll help out too. Yeah. But this is actually a reasonably successful podcast in terms of actual podcast audio format on other stuff, which is pretty cool.
I have not actually looked at the numbers. I want to wait until the end of season 1, which is
the end
seasons? Of the year. I don't know.
That it?
I don't think
4 episodes.
We've kind of loosely talked about having where it's like, well, I guess now it would be 22 episodes per month or per year, not per month, per year, right? Because it would be
26.
It used to be 1 per
every other week.
Yes, sorry, every other week. And then the last 2 episodes would be a topic that we think needs a part 1 and a part 2. And that was kind of what we were thinking. And that would be a season, but we haven't really decided on anything.
We might just keep counting up.
Yeah.
We get to like episode 500.
I hate that, though. I hate podcasts on episode 300.
No, I think that's cool. All right. Anyway, thank you for listening or watching wherever you are. And we'll see you or you'll listen to us in the next episode of BrickSide Chat.
Goodbye.